The dust devils danced on the cracked asphalt of the county road as I pulled up to the farmhouse. Late afternoon sun cast long, skeletal shadows from the dilapidated barn, and a silence thicker than molasses hung in the air. Martha had called me, her voice tight with a fear that prickled even through the phone line. Said her husband Jedediah hadn't come back from checking the north pasture yesterday. Jedediah, a man who knew those fields like the back of his calloused hand. I cut the engine, the sudden quiet amplifying the chirping of unseen crickets. It wasn't a comforting sound. It felt watchful. Martha stood on the porch, a frail silhouette against the deepening gloom of the house's interior. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands twisting a corner of her apron. "Thank you for coming, Thomas," she whispered, her voice raspy. "Sheriff's deputies. They looked around some this morning. Said they didn't see anything out of the ordinary, just gone. Gone." That word echoed the unsettling emptiness I felt radiating from the land itself. Jedediah wasn't the type to wander off. He was as rooted to this farm as the ancient oak that stood sentinel at the property line. We started our search in the north pasture. The grass was tall and dry, whispering secrets to the light breeze. We called his name, our voices swallowed by the vastness. An hour passed, then two. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of blood orange and bruised purple, beautiful yet ominous. Then I saw it. A patch of disturbed earth near the tree line. The grass flattened and stained a dark, almost black color. My gut clenched. It wasn't mud. Martha gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh dear Lord. Following the disturbed earth, we found tracks. Not Jedediah's usual heavy boot prints, but something else. Larger, with a strange, almost clawed impression. They led into the dense woods bordering the pasture, a place locals whispered stories about. Tales of strange lights and unsettling howls. The deputies. They didn't see this? Martha asked, her voice trembling. They probably didn't venture this far, I replied, trying to sound reassuring, though a cold dread was creeping up my spine. We pressed on, the woods growing darker and colder with each step. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something faintly metallic. The trees seemed to lean in, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out. Then we heard it. A low, guttural growl, closer than it should have been. Martha clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a coyote. We froze, listening. The growl came again, followed by a sickening crunch. A wave of nausea washed over me. Whatever was out there was feeding. Slowly, cautiously, I pushed aside a thick curtain of vines. What I saw made my blood run cold. Jedediah lay sprawled on the forest floor, his body mangled beyond recognition. And hunched over him was something I couldn't quite comprehend. It was large, hunched with matted fur and glowing red eyes that fixed on me the moment I moved. Its teeth were long and sharp, stained crimson. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a wolf. It was something ancient, something twisted, something that belonged in the darkest corners of folklore. A primal fear gripped me, paralyzing me for a heartbeat. Then the creature let out a deafening shriek, a sound that clawed at my sanity. It lunged. I shoved Martha behind me, scrambling backward. The creature moved with terrifying speed, its powerful limbs tearing through the undergrowth. I stumbled, grabbing a fallen branch, the rough bark digging into my hand. It was on me in an instant, its fetid breath hot on my face. I swung the branch wildly, connecting with a sickening thud. The creature recoiled, hissing, its red eyes burning with malevolent intelligence. This wasn't a hunt. This was a slaughter. Martha screamed, a raw, desperate sound. The creature turned, its attention to her, and in that moment something snapped within me. Fear gave way to a cold, furious resolve. Jedediah was gone. I wouldn't let Martha suffer the same fate. I charged, wielding the branch like a weapon. The creature met my attack with surprising ferocity, its claws raking my arm. Pain seared through me, but I held my ground, fueled by adrenaline and a terrifying certainty. This thing had taken Jedediah. It wouldn't take Martha too. The fight was brutal, a desperate dance of survival in the deepening twilight. The late summer sun beat down on the cracked windshield as I navigated the winding dirt roads of Havenwood County. I was on assignment, a freelance photographer documenting the dwindling traditions of rural craftsmanship. My current subject, old Mrs. Gable, the last known maker of hand-carved scarecrows in the region. Her farm was reputedly deep in the backwoods, a place even the locals rarely ventured. Her directions were cryptic, involving landmarks long since gone and turns onto unmarked paths. By the time I finally saw the dilapidated signpost reading Gables, the sky was bleeding into hues of bruised purple, and the air had grown thick and still. The farmhouse was a study in decay, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin, the porch sagging precariously. But the yard was something else entirely. Dozens of scarecrows stood scattered across the overgrown lawn, their straw-stuffed bodies contorted into grotesque poses, their painted eyes staring blankly in every direction. They weren't the cheerful guardians of cornfields I remembered from childhood. These were unsettling, almost menacing. An elderly woman emerged from the shadows of the porch, her face a roadmap of deep wrinkles, her eyes sharp and unsettlingly bright. This had to be Mrs. Gable. "You the picture man?" she rasped, her voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. I nodded, a polite smile feeling strained on my face. "Thomas Ashton. It's a pleasure, Mrs. Gable." She didn't return the smile. "Come on then, lights fading." She led me through the yard, the scarecrows seeming to watch my every move. Their stillness was unnerving, their silent vigil creating an atmosphere of palpable unease. Some were dressed in tattered clothes that looked eerily human-sized, their painted smiles fixed in what seemed like mocking grins. Inside the farmhouse, the air was heavy with the smell of dust, dried herbs, and something else. A faint, earthy sweetness that I couldn't quite place. The rooms were cluttered with strange carvings, bundles of dried plants and more scarecrows. Smaller ones perched on shelves, larger ones leaning against walls. Over the next few days, I photographed Mrs. Gable as she meticulously crafted her scarecrows. Her movements were surprisingly agile for her age, her gnarled hands deftly shaping straw and stitching fabric. She spoke little, her silence adding to the unsettling atmosphere of the farm. But it was the scarecrows that truly unnerved me. Their expressions seemed to change subtly from day to day. A smile that looked merely painted one morning would seem almost predatory the next. Their heads sometimes appeared to be turned ever so slightly, as if they were following me with their vacant eyes. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, distorted shadows across the yard, I noticed one scarecrow in particular. It stood near the edge of the woods, taller than the others, dressed in what looked like a faded, dark suit. Its painted face was obscured by shadow, but its posture seemed almost predatory, its head tilted as if listening. I raised my camera, wanting to capture the unsettling image, but Mrs. Gable's voice startled me. "Don't take pictures of that one," she said sharply, her eyes narrowed. "That one ain't for pictures." Her vehemence was unsettling. "Why not, Mrs. Gable?" She just shook her head, her gaze fixed on the scarecrow in the shadows. Some things are best left unseen." That night I had trouble sleeping. Every creak of the old house, every rustle of leaves outside my window, sounded like footsteps. I kept imagining the scarecrows in the yard, their painted eyes glowing in the darkness, their silent vigil continuing. The next day, I noticed something new about the scarecrow in the dark suit. One of its gloved hands seemed to be slightly raised, as if in a beckoning gesture. A prickle of fear ran down my spine. It was just the light, I told myself. Just my imagination playing tricks on me. But the feeling persisted. The scarecrows seemed to be growing more present. I would catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, only to find them still when I turned my head. The whispering wind seemed to carry faint, unintelligible murmurs when I was near them. I started to feel like I was being watched, not just by Mrs. Gable, but by her silent, straw-filled creations. Their blank eyes seemed to hold a knowing quality, a silent awareness that was deeply disturbing. One afternoon I was photographing Mrs. Gable in her workshop, surrounded by half-finished scarecrows. I asked her about the stories surrounding Havenwood County, the whispers of strange occurrences. She stopped her work, her sharp eyes fixing on me. This land, it remembers things that are best forgotten. What kind of things? I pressed. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she picked up a piece of burlap, her gnarled fingers stroking its rough surface. Sometimes, she said softly, her voice barely a whisper, what you bury doesn't always stay buried. That night, the wind howled around the farmhouse, rattling the windows. I couldn't shake the feeling that the scarecrows were more than just straw and fabric. They seemed to absorb the darkness, to become conduits for something ancient and malevolent. I woke in the middle of the night to a chilling sound, a soft scraping coming from outside my window. I cautiously peered out. In the pale moonlight, I saw it. The scarecrow in the dark suit was no longer still. Its head was slowly turning, its obscured face now angled directly towards my window. Terror seized me. This wasn't my imagination. Something was terribly wrong here. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking, and tried to call for help. But there was no signal. Havenwood County was a dead zone. I was trapped. The scraping sound came again, closer this time. I could hear the faint rustling of straw, the creaking of wood. The scarecrow was moving. I barricaded the door with a heavy chest of drawers, my heart pounding in my ears. The scraping continued outside, circling the house. I could almost feel the blank stare of those painted eyes. As dawn finally broke, casting a weak light through the windows, the scraping stopped. Silence descended once more, but it was a silence thick with dread. I cautiously opened the door. The scarecrows stood motionless in the yard, just as they had been before. But something had changed. The scarecrow in the dark suit was now standing, directly in front of my window, its obscured face inches from the glass, and then I saw it. A faint, almost imperceptible movement beneath the brim of its hat. A glint of something that wasn't painted. Something that looked like a real eye. I didn't. Wait. I grabbed my camera bag and fled the farmhouse, running blindly across the overgrown yard. The silent, staring figure seeming to watch me go. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I drove away from Gable's farm. The image of that scarecrow burned into my mind. I never looked back. I never finished my assignment. Some traditions, I realized, are best left undocumented. Some corners of the countryside hold secrets that are far more terrifying than folklore. And sometimes, the scarecrows aren't just meant to scare away birds, they're meant to watch and to wait for something else entirely. And I had the chilling feeling that in Havenwood County they were waiting for me. The engine of my old pickup coughed its last as I coasted to a stop at the edge of Oakhaven. The town lived up to its name. Ancient oaks draped in Spanish moss casting long, skeletal shadows across the deserted main street. I was here on a genealogical quest, tracing a branch of my family tree that supposedly ended somewhere in this forgotten corner of Georgia. The silence was immediate and profound, broken only by the drone of cicadas hidden in the dense foliage. There were no signs of life, no cars, no open businesses. It felt less like a town and more like a meticulously preserved ghost. According to the faded map I'd found in my grandmother's attic, the ancestral homestead lay a few miles outside of Oakhaven, down a rutted dirt track called Widow's Creek Road. The name itself sent a faint shiver down my spine. The road was barely passable, overgrown with weeds and riddled with potholes. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The woods on either side seemed to press in, their tangled branches forming a claustrophobic canopy overhead. After what felt like an eternity, I finally reached a clearing. In the center stood a dilapidated farmhouse, its windows like vacant eyes staring out at the encroaching wilderness. A sense of profound isolation hung in the air. As I stepped out of my truck, a low, rhythmic thumping sound reached my ears. It was faint, almost like a heartbeat, and seemed to emanate from the woods behind the house. Hesitantly, I approached the farmhouse. The front door hung ajar, creaking slightly in a non-existent breeze. Inside, the air was stale and musty, filled with the scent of disuse and something else, a faint metallic tang like old blood. The furniture was draped in white sheets, giving the interior the eerie appearance of a mausoleum. Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight that pierced through the grimy windows. There was no sign of recent habitation. The thumping sound was more distinct inside, seemingly coming from the basement. A knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach. I grabbed a heavy, rusted fireplace poker before cautiously making my way to the basement door. The wooden steps groaned under my weight as I descended into the darkness. The thumping grew louder with each step, resonating in my chest. The metallic smell was overpowering here. The basement was a single large room, the air thick and damp. Moonlight filtering through a small, grimy window revealed a horrifying scene. Suspended from the rafters were dozens of burlap sacks, swaying gently in a silent rhythm, and from each sack came that incessant rhythmic thumping. My blood ran cold. What was inside those sacks? I cautiously approached one of the sacks, my hand trembling as I reached out to touch it. The thumping inside intensified, accompanied by a soft, wet squelch. Suddenly, the sack nearest me began to writhe violently. A low, guttural moan escaped from within. My grip tightened on the poker. With a surge of adrenaline, I tore open the sack. What I saw made my stomach lurch. Inside was a human form, contorted and pale, its eyes wide with terror. Its mouth was sewn shut with thick black thread, and its body was rhythmically convulsing, causing the thumping sound. I recoiled in horror, stumbling backward. The other sacks began to move, the thumping and moaning intensifying, creating a cacophony of muffled suffering. I had stumbled upon something unspeakable, something deeply twisted and perverse. This wasn't just an abandoned farmhouse, it was a charnel house. Panic clawed at my throat. I had to get out of here. Now. As I turned to flee, a figure emerged from the shadows in the far corner of the basement. It was tall and gaunt, its face obscured by darkness, but its eyes glowed with a faint, unsettling luminescence. It held a long, wickedly sharp needle in its hand, threaded with the same thick, black thread that bound the mouths of its victims. A silent scream built in my chest. This was the source of the horror, the puppet master behind this macabre symphony of suffering. The figure moved with surprising speed, its bare feet making no sound on the damp concrete floor. It lunged towards me, the needle glinting in the dim moonlight. I swung the poker wildly, connecting with a sickening thud against its arm. The figure hissed, a low, rasping sound, and stumbled back, but its glowing eyes never left mine. I scrambled up the stairs, the sounds of the writhing sacks and the figure's soft footsteps echoing behind me. I burst through the back door and into the oppressive darkness of the yard. I didn't know where to go. The farmhouse was surrounded by dense woods. The only way out was back down Widow's Creek Road. I ran, my lungs burning. The image of the bound figures and the glowing eyes seared into my mind. The rhythmic thumping seemed to follow me, a phantom heartbeat in the silence of the night. I could hear the soft rustling of leaves behind me, the snapping of twigs. The figure was pursuing me, its movements unnaturally silent. I stumbled through the darkness, the twisted shapes of the ancient oaks looming like monstrous sentinels. The air was thick with fear and the metallic tang of blood. Then I saw it. A faint light flickering through the trees ahead. It had to be the main road, Oakhaven. Salvation. I pushed myself harder, my legs aching, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The rustling behind me grew closer. Just as I reached the edge of the woods, I felt a sharp pain in my leg. I cried out and fell to the ground. I looked back and saw the figure standing at the edge of the trees, the glowing eyes fixed on me. It held the long needle in its hand, a dark stain visible on its tip. Paralyzed by fear, I could only watch as it slowly approached, its silent, menacing presence filling the darkness. The thumping sound, though still faint, seemed to resonate from somewhere deep within the woods, a constant reminder of the horrors I had witnessed. The figure knelt beside me, its face still obscured by shadow, but the luminescence of its eyes was undeniable. It raised the needle, and I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable. But the pain never came. Instead, I felt a cold, clammy touch on my cheek. I opened my eyes. The figure was gone. The only sound was the drone of cicadas and the frantic pounding of my own heart. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, unable to move, the terror still gripping me. Finally, with a surge of adrenaline, I forced myself to stand. I limped, back towards Oakhaven, the faint glow of the deserted town a beacon in the darkness. When I finally reached the main street, the silence was even more unsettling than before, now imbued with the knowledge of the unspeakable horrors hidden just beyond its borders. I never reported what I saw. Who would believe me? The town of Oakhaven remained silent, its secrets buried deep within the whispering woods and the rhythmic thumping of its hidden basement. And I knew with a chilling certainty that the branch of my family tree I had sought to trace was rooted in something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined, a darkness that still echoed in the silent, watchful trees. The thumping. I could still hear it sometimes, a phantom sound in the dead of night, a constant reminder of the living nightmares that thrived in the forgotten corners of the countryside. Widow's Creek Road. I would never forget that name.